Welcome back to the Drone Camps channel. We have brand new news today about the Chinese drone ban and tariffs that are set to be in place upcoming in the Senate, as well as a brand new meeting that happened this morning in Washington, D.C., where Skydio CEO Adam Bry testified as a witness to the Select Committee of the CCP. I'll put that website link down below. There was a 2-hour meeting. They did live stream it to their YouTube channel, so I'll also put a link to that so you can see the whole meeting in its entirety, or you can watch the excerpts right here in this newscast. Some of the witnesses for the hearing were Adam Bry, the CEO of Skydio, Chris Miller, and David McCall. And the focus of this hearing was chips, ships, and drones, and the wide gap between China and the US manufacturing of these items. And each of these witnesses spoke on how we as the United States could compete with ongoing Chinese competition of these industries. Currently, it's known that China controls about 90% of the US drone market and only 10% is non-DJI. So let's jump right into the meeting now. Let me show you some excerpts from that meeting today. The first clip we're going to look at is Chinese drones versus other drones in manufacturing.
China currently controls a whopping 90% of the US drone market. So what do we do about it? Here's a brief analogy. In a few weeks, athletes from around the world will gather for the Olympics. Some athletes win by breaking the rules, but others win through investing in themselves and becoming the best at their sport. It's the difference between a rigged game and a fair competition. It turns out that outcompeting the CCP isn't all that different. Because the CCP is not currently playing fair, we need to do two things. One, we need to stop the CCP from breaking the rules. And two, we have to invest in ourselves to win.
And now I'll give you a look at Adam Bry of Skydio's opening remarks to the committee.
Mr. Bry, you are now recognized for your opening remarks.
Thank you. Chairman Mulnar, Ranking Member Krishnamurthy, and members of the committee, it's an honor to be here with you today. We're having this discussion at a critical moment for the drone industry and an inflection point in artificial intelligence. And as I'm sure we'll discuss, both of these technologies are increasingly at the center of our national security and our competition with China. I think autonomous drones are critical for two reasons. One, they are becoming critical tools for many of our most critical industries. And two, they represent the competitive playing field for leadership in AI, robots in general, and for leadership in the next century of aviation. Now, since it bears on the discussion we might have, I'd like to be clear up front that if I'm an expert in anything, it's drones and AI, not China and geopolitical competition. My passion for aviation came from my grandfather, who served as a crew chief in the US Army Air Force during World War II, keeping B-17 bombers in the air over Europe. And I grew up flying radio-controlled airplanes, which were the predecessors to drones. As a grad student in the computer science and artificial intelligence lab at MIT, I really became obsessed with trying to build AI software that could fly these systems better than the best human pilots. And when we founded Skydio, we started with a big bet on AI. We essentially build the skills of an expert pilot into the drone so that it can fly itself. And we did this because we felt like that was going to be the key to making these products more useful to more people in more places. We're now the largest US drone manufacturer and world leader in autonomous flight. Our products are used to inspect the energy grid. They're used to ensure the integrity of our bridges and our transportation infrastructure. They're used to de-escalate the most dangerous situations in public safety with minimal use of force. And they're used to give our soldiers better situational awareness on the battlefield. Now, competition with China plays out in every sector that we serve. But I think the military use of drones and the use of drones in Ukraine is instructive. I actually had the chance to visit Ukraine, meet with many of their drone operators, and they don't do anything without putting a drone in the air. They use drones to deliver strikes. They use drones to surveil the battlefield. They use drones to inspect buildings that have been damaged, to document Russian war crimes. Skydio has delivered over 1,000 drones to Ukraine, but our Chinese competitors have delivered over 100,000 systems. Now, the Ukrainian dependence on Chinese drones is extremely fragile. These are fundamentally a hostile platform. They have to hack them to stop them from giving away their position to their Russian adversaries. And the Chinese are increasingly using export controls to restrict the flow of drones into Ukraine. Now, our latest generation drone, the Skydio X10, which we have here today, has some real breakthroughs in AI that make it much more resistant to Russian electronic warfare. And the Ukrainians have requested thousands of these systems for use on the front lines and elsewhere. Now, before we move on to questions, I'd like to leave you with two big ideas, two key thoughts. One is that as important as drones are today, the technology is really still in its infancy, and it's going to become far more important over time. It's really going to become, I think, bedrock infrastructure for many of our critical industries, responding to 911 calls automatically in seconds, well ahead of how quickly responding officers on the ground can get there, persistently inspecting the energy grid in an automated fashion to keep the lights on. And I think it would be really insane to accept a future where we're dependent on our adversaries for technology this critical. But I think the second really important idea is that U.S. companies can compete and win. I think Skydio is proof of this. The shift to AI and the increasing importance of software on these devices plays to our strengths. And we're also fortunate now to have an increasingly strong group of U.S. peer companies doing everything from tactical SWAT drones to drone delivery. And I'm 100% confident that as an industry, as a U.S. industry, we can meet the need and the opportunity. And I think you all have an opportunity to help support this and ensure that the future of this industry is built based on U.S.-made drones. And the path to do that comes through supporting end users in public safety and critical infrastructure operators. I think also scaling our own military's use of drones to reflect the reality of the modern battlefield, what we're seeing in Ukraine. And then I think the most pressing opportunity and the most pressing need is to supply U.S.-made drones where they're needed most on the battlefield in Ukraine. Thank you.
And in this next clip, Adam Bry speaks about how Chinese companies have been subsidized by the Chinese government to create massive quantities of drone parts and drones.
I want to start with Mr. Bree. In your testimony, you write that the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, has poured resources into national champions in the drone sector. To clarify by this, you mean state-sponsored subsidies that have artificially reduced the cost of drone production? Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman, that's my understanding based on publicly available information.
And have these state interventions led to market distortions and overcapacity that has affected the U.S. and partner company market share in the drone industry?
Yes, Chairman. I mean, I think the Chinese government recognized the strategic importance of drones and pretty clearly invested to support their industry there.
And if these distortions continue without action by the U.S., will there be alternatives to PRC drones in the decades ahead?
Well, sir, I'm an engineer, and we come at this from a product perspective. I mean, our goal is to build the best products in the world right here in the U.S. I will say that competing head-to-head with Chinese companies that are supported directly by their government is extremely difficult, and the national security stakes, I think, are enormous. I mean, these are the ultimate data capturing tool for all kinds of critical industries.
So what I hear you saying is this would pose a significant national security risk. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I believe that's the case.
Okay, thank you.
Up next is Mr. Krishnamurthy. He speaks on how China drones are 90% of the U.S. market share and how DJI is the cheapest available best drone in the U.S.
Finally, I want to shift to the topic of drones. American companies don't really sell drones to China. On the other hand, Chinese companies dominate our market. One Chinese company, DJI, accounts for 90% of the U.S. consumer market for drones. DJI dominates our market because they're cheap, thanks to massive backing from the CCP, including equity investments from government-controlled funds. Just to be clear, the government invests in Chinese drone companies. Here's one we found on a popular website today for $300, okay? Mr. Bree, I actually brought one of your drones today. This is the Skydio 2 Plus. I'm sure that you recognize this. Unfortunately, this sells for over $1,000 for consumers. Now, Mr. Bree, this $1,000 is quite a bit more than the $300 that you can buy a DJI drone for, right?
That's correct, sir, yes.
Now, today, I guess it's no surprise that Skydio pulled out of the U.S. consumer market last year, but across all three sectors, Mr. Chair, the CCP plan is very much the same. They deny access to our markets, and then they flood our markets. I'm sorry, they deny their market to our companies, and then they flood our market with their products, cheaply produced, cheaply made, and heavily subsidized by the CCP. We got to take action on this. I yield back.
Moving on to about 57 minutes into the meeting, they speak about drone tariffs.
I know that, Mr. Bride, you deal in drones, and I know I've got a constituent who has one of the Chinese drones, and he uses it for crop dusting. It's a kind of a new way of going about things. Instead of a plane, he uses a drone. And I think the administration has outlined those drones from the standpoint of the military since, I think, 2017, I believe it is. But they came out recently to try and outlaw that for American citizens to begin no longer being able to purchase those. And one of the things they're going to do is probably tariff those things and then there's a bill right now that says that they want to tariff these kinds of activities and then use that to incentivize buying American-made drones. How effective do you think that would be?
Well, I appreciate the question, Representative. I mean, I think measures like what you just described make a huge amount of sense. We win as a company, I think, by leveraging innovation and free markets. And so placing tariffs on subsidized products coming from our geopolitical competitors and using the funds from that to let end users pick the best secure products and technology, I think makes a huge amount of sense.
So the point is, if you're going to tariff drones, why don't we tariff chips? Would that be a way to incentivize the industries and the markets to be developed here?
Well, I think there is substantial discussion underway right now on this exact topic, whether there should be higher tariffs on semiconductors.
It would appear to me if it works for drones, it would work for chips. And we need to be taking a look at that as a way to incentivize investment being here so we can do something. Very quickly, I've got about 30 seconds left, Mr. Bry. Artificial intelligence is a really big deal. I know it's really incorporated a lot into drones. Would you want to elaborate just a bit on that as a competitive advantage or disadvantage with regards to Chinese production?
Yeah, it's a great question, sir. I think the most important thing for people to understand is that as important as these products are now, they're becoming way more powerful and way more important. And it's a combination of two things. It's one, the drones becoming AI-driven themselves so that they can fly themselves, and then two, cloud connectivity. So our latest generation drones have 5G modems built in. They connect to the cellular network, which greatly expands their reach. And so I think whatever the stakes are today, they're just going to go up from a national and a cybersecurity standpoint. And so if we're going to act, now is the time to do it.
Okay, my time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
And now we're at about the halfway point in this meeting, and now they're going to talk about how Ukraine and drone development in Ukraine is affecting the global market.
One of the successes of the last 6 to 12 months for Ukraine has been their use of drones in the Black Sea to push back the Russian Navy. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us about what U.S. industry can do with our allies, not just Ukraine, but Estonia, Poland, to double down on investments in maritime autonomous drones for use in establishing maritime supremacy and freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, but ultimately in the Indo-Pacific as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, Representative. I mean, I think that the level of innovation, drone innovation in Ukraine is astounding. Like they use drones for everything all the time. They have a burgeoning industry there. I think the most important thing for us to do is to recognize that. And the products that are being used on the front lines in Ukraine are the ones that are going to mature the fastest and be the most competitive on the global stage. So, I think the opportunity is to surge in and supply U.S.-made products to the Ukrainians to help them in their fight against Russia, and also force our products to be on the leading edge of technology and competition.
It seems like doing that requires sort of this threading together of capital, expertise, and then the sort of the living laboratory to get feedback loops about what's working and what's not. Of those three things, what are we missing right now? I think we got enough money, right? But is it the expertise? Is it the feedback loops from the battlefield to the technologists?
I mean, the question I would ask is the money aimed at the right thing? I mean, there's a lot of money available to fund supplies for Ukraine. To date, very little of that has gone towards drones.
Yeah,
and so
the Pentagon's replicator program is not funded, right?
I think it's funded at a very low level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there's a lot of momentum and sort of talk about we need more small, smart, attritable systems. I think sending putting the dollars towards systems going to Ukraine is what I see the best opportunity to make that real.
I've heard that repeatedly. We're not putting the advanced market commitments down for actual swarms of drones, maritime and aerial. We got to get serious about actually buying these things at scale.
Yeah, I'd buy them at scale and send them to Ukraine.
Yep.
And around 1 hour and 7 minutes into the hearing, they asked Skydio CEO Adam Bry what he thinks about how the U.S. can compete with economic pricing on high-quality USA-made drones versus Chinese drones, and how we could be competitive.
Mr. Bree, it's interesting you're here. I was just been home in the district the last month several times, talking to those people that use drones in agriculture. I'm a farmer myself. It's becoming quite a technology that's being embraced. And thankfully, your company provides a superior product to some of those that are options that are probably the one that was shown here today. So I'm very happy about that. But as you know, American companies, American consumers, when it comes down to picking whatever product they may be looking or shopping for, a lot of times comes down to the price. So since we're relying on these things so extensively, and that's growing, tell me what some of the barriers to producing more affordable drones in the U.S. might be, and how we can maybe help improve those market conditions. And is there any role that the Department of Agriculture, either federally or statewide, could play in making sure that farmers and Forest Service planners, everybody that utilizes these things has access to more affordable American-made machines?
Well, Representative Newhouse, I really appreciate the question and the sentiment behind the question. I would say the single biggest factor in price is scale. The larger the scale you're manufacturing at, the lower your price is going to be. Our cost structure is quite a bit higher than our Chinese competitors because we're operating at lower scale. We don't pass all of that cost along to our customers. We eat a lot of it ourselves. But the larger scale we get to, the lower we can get our costs, the more affordable our products become, the more customers they can reach. And so I think there's just this flywheel that we have to spin up, and measures like we discussed earlier, where potentially tariffs on Chinese drones are used to support and fund the purchases of U.S.-made drones and let the end users pick the best product technology that suits them. I think things like that could make quite a bit of sense in leveraging the things that we're great at as a country in innovation and competition to get the flywheel spinning faster.
At around 1 hour and 27 minutes into the meeting, they then asked Adam, how can we improve our supplies here in the United States of manufactured drones?
Representative Hinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing today, and to our ranking member as well. Thank you to our witnesses. I want to tackle and kind of follow up on a couple of items that my colleagues have already talked about today. But really, the barriers that are hindering our ability to strengthen and expand U.S. domestic drone manufacturing is what I'm concerned about. And I think that there is a lot of regulatory environment improvement that we could probably be making. We have to ensure that our supply chains are secure. That's absolutely critical for our national security. We talk a lot about the vulnerabilities that exist in the technology right now coming from China. We have seen, though, that stringent regulatory burden for manufacturing and purchasing drones here in the U.S. can be detrimental for our U.S. businesses, first responders. We've got a lot of farmers in Iowa who use these drones, and they're using Chinese-made drones right now. We're trying to change that, obviously, but when foreign companies are importing these into the U.S., we've talked about the price discrepancies there. Obviously, they don't have to follow that same regulatory challenge that we do. And I know, Mr. Bry, you already talked about this a little bit, but are there areas of U.S. regulation where you think we could make some improvements to help us really strengthen domestic drone production? What steps would you say need to be taken to help diversify those supply chains so we are not relying on chips from China for our manufacturing here?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question, Representative. I point to two things, and actually touching on something we talked about earlier, immigration policy. We compete for the world's best talent in AI and robotics, and oftentimes we have to jump through all kinds of crazy hoops to get PhDs and master's level folks, many of whom have studied abroad in the U.S. to receive those degrees. And I think there may be a misconception. I mean, it's not a zero-sum game. Like, one brilliant scientist or engineer can create 10 or 100 or 1,000 other jobs by bringing good ideas to the table. So that strikes me as a real opportunity, especially at the high end for highly skilled people with unique skills. There's just a huge multiplicative effect in every industry, especially leading edge technology industries, by making it easier for those folks to come. And then the second area that I'd point to is our airspace regulation. The airspace regulation set the rules of the road, so to speak, for drones. Historically, the U.S. has lagged a little bit behind in permitting more advanced uses of drones, being able to fly beyond visual line of sight, which is incredibly useful for large infrastructure inspection as well as responding to emergencies and public safety. I think we're making progress there, but the more that our own regulations reflect the next century of aviation, the more innovation we're likely to see in the U.S. and then have that innovation spread to the rest of the world.
How do you think the government can work to help offset some of the cost? Because, I mean, we've talked about that discrepancy. What more can we do there?
Well, I think the idea that's been floated of placing tariffs on Chinese drones or increasing tariffs on Chinese drones, or at least enforcing the tariffs that are already there. I mean, the Chinese are also trying to get around these by going in through other countries and using those funds to give end users the ability to purchase U.S.-made products of their own choosing, I think is one of the more natural opportunities that's going to leverage our strengths.
Yeah, I'm actually working on a bill right now to make sure they can't get around tariffs. So we're definitely trying to tackle that.
Now, around 1 hour and 37 minutes into the hearing, this got interesting. They asked Adam Bry what other companies besides DJI and Autel Robotics would possibly be a security risk to the United States.
Recently, Autel was added to the entity list for their involvement in distributing controlled items to aid Russia's war effort, and DJI was already listed due to their use cases of biometric surveillance and tracking to complement China's Uyghur genocide operation. These ties are troubling as market studies indicate that Chinese-made drones account for roughly 60% of the American industrial market and have an outsized presence in the first responder market. However, you're now seeing states taking matters into their own hands and restricting the use of Chinese drones, states like Florida, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Can you tell me what kind of other drones use cases present national security threats and vulnerabilities?
Well, Representative Klein, I really appreciate the question. I think one of the most important things to understand is just the dual-use nature of the technology, and you can see it in the information that you're citing. Oftentimes, the same drones that are being used in public safety are the ones that the Russians are using on the battlefield in Ukraine. So there's just an inherent national security risk because it's such a powerful dual-use technology. Another sector I would point to, which is a really important one for us, is energy. So we sell to a number of the largest energy utilities in the U.S. They use our drones to inspect the energy grid, and we're headed towards a world where drones essentially become part of the energy infrastructure, where every power plant, every substation has an autonomous drone installed there that can fly itself, that can perform persistent inspections. And so, if the risk is a 3 or 4 today, it goes up to a 9 or 10 when these things really become network-connected, installed infrastructure.
Critical infrastructure, bridges, roads as well.
Yes, sir. I mean, we sell to a number of the state departments of transportation. They are heavy drone users. I think we're doing quite well in that market, but the Chinese drones are still present.
In what ways does the technology present privacy concerns to would-be users?
So this is another really important question and something we think quite a bit about. One of the ways we think about what we're building is the world's best automated data capture platform, which is super powerful for all kinds of great uses, but definitely comes with some privacy concerns as well. This is something we work with our customers on. We've taken a proactive stance in best practices, for example, in public safety. We do a lot of work with our customer agencies there on community engagement, transparency, best practices to build trust with community and make sure that their officers are using drones in appropriate ways. But I think the privacy concerns speak to the greater sort of risk profile of having drones that are connecting back to Chinese servers and in the worst case could actually be taking instructions from those servers.
Thank you.
And around 1 hour and 45 minutes into the hearing, we hear again from Adam Bry. He has his final remarks and his closing statements to the committee.
Mr. Adam Bry?
Well, look, sir, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I know a lot about AI and drones. I know much less about shipbuilding. I think it's overall important for us to focus on the competitiveness of our industries and in competitiveness of our manufacturing. The Chinese have invested extremely heavily over the last 2 to 3 decades in trade policy and industrial policy to build up a formidable consumer electronics manufacturing base. I oftentimes say wherever they're building iPhones, they're going to be building a lot of other stuff as well because of the ecosystem that gets pulled along with it. And that's something that we see and face in the drone industry, but I also don't think it's an insurmountable task. We actually see in Silicon Valley now a lot of manufacturing coming back to the U.S. I think that's worth supporting. To your specific question, I think we're going to have to pay for that somehow, and there's short-term costs for long-term benefit. I'm not an expert in the trade-offs there, but I think that we have to recognize that we are going to have to make some investments as a country to bring back the manufacturing base.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I want to thank all of our witnesses today. Questions for the record are due 1 week from today, and without objection, the committee hearing is adjourned.
So that's it for today's drone news. Thanks for hanging out with us and tuning in to the Drone Camps channel. If you do like drone news, freedom, and your right to fly drones, be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell for when the new videos and news and reviews come out. I'm Justin Davis of Drone Camps RC. I will see you on the next one.